Hi, Wyoming students and teachers. We are so excited today to have Dr. Holly Krutka, from the Executive Director of the School of Energy Resources at the University of Wyoming. I saw her speak at the Governor's Business Forum a couple of weeks ago in mid-November 2024, and she has very graciously offered to speak to you about the Cyber in a Box School video challenge topic of securing Wyoming's critical energy infrastructure and give her perspective of our energy landscape, which is very unique from some of the other videos. So I'm really excited to have you here today. Thank you so much for coming.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
It's awesome. Okay, so the first question I have for you, Holly, is what is in Wyoming's energy industry future, and what are fossil fuels being used for besides energy?
Yeah. Okay. Well, thank you so much for having me, Laura. And hi, everyone out there. This is my favorite topic to talk about. So I think it's just a really exciting time to be involved in the Wyoming energy sector. I say it over and over. So Laura, you would have heard me say this at the Governor's Business Forum, but I think Wyoming is the best place in the nation to undertake novel energy demonstrations. And it's not just me, industry thinks that as well. That's why we have so many great projects going on here in Wyoming. And so it's a great time to be here at the School of Energy Resources and at the University of Wyoming. And there's going to be a lot of opportunities for students who are interested in energy and want to get into that sector. So let me just give you a few examples. So one that folks have hopefully heard of is that a company called TerraPower is building the Wyoming's first nuclear reactor. It's in Kemmer, Wyoming. And it's really exciting because it's an advanced reactor. So for a long time, the US has built the same kind of nuclear power plant, and this is different. So what's different about it? It has a lot of safety upgrades that have been learned over the years. And it also has built-in heat storage, so it can really ramp up and down. So if you think about our electricity grid today, it has a lot more wind and solar. Plus, every time you turn on a light switch, if you and all your neighbors are getting home at the end of the day, or if it's cold and we're all turning on our heaters, there's a lot more energy demand. And so this plant can ramp up and down to help balance wind and solar and to meet our needs. So it's just a really cool technology. And they are building their very first demonstration here in Wyoming, but they're also looking at a bunch of other power plants in and around Wyoming and Utah that are older that are going to close and seeing if those might also be good sites. So I think they've looked at up to 5 or 6 locations. And so they're looking about where to build the next one. So there's going to be opportunities in that sector for a long time. Wyoming is also the home of the Choke Cherry Sierra Madre wind facility, which is the largest onshore wind facility in America that's being built today. And it will be the largest when it's fully constructed. And that's to take Wyoming's incredible resource of wind and turn it into electricity and deliver it to the West Coast. And that's being undertaken by a company called the Power Company of Wyoming, which is owned by the Anschutz Corporation. Also, oil and gas, really exciting time for Wyoming oil and gas. So there's some really cool stuff happening in oil and gas. So one is enhanced oil recovery is being undertaken here in Wyoming, and it's kind of a cool technology where you take carbon dioxide, or sometimes what people call carbon emissions, and you purify them and you inject them into oil seams to produce more oil. So what you have is getting more oil out of reservoirs that already exist, that are already been drilled, and there's already wells, and you're able to get more oil out of there. And also that carbon or carbon dioxide actually stays underground, or you can re-inject it. Long term, it stays underground. So you have a very low carbon footprint oil. And that's important because, Laura, you mentioned we use oil for all kinds of things. We use it for, of course, we know about gasoline and some other oils for our cars, but we also use it for things like plastics. Plastics are made from oil. Pretty much look around the room you're in. Anything that is plastic is probably got it's oil derived, but there's all kinds of materials. So one of our favorite sayings from our Wyoming state geologist that I love is, if it wasn't grown, it was mined or drilled. And so that includes medicines and pharmaceuticals. So oil is just a really important component and building block for our lives. And that's true for natural gas too. And when it comes to natural gas, Wyoming has some really great um, operators who've been working with us here at the University of Wyoming and Department of Environmental Quality. And they're just really top notch in terms of reclamation. They're nationally and internationally recognized. So that means when they drill something, they reclaim the land to what it was, make it really friendly for this environment and for wildlife. They're good community members. And one thing that not everyone knows is that Wyoming natural gas has the lowest methane intensity west of the Mississippi. And what that means is we don't have very many leaks. And so that's what the University of Wyoming and the producers and DEQ have all kind of worked together over years to really create a new product. And it's a lower methane intensity natural gas, or it's called differentiated gas sometimes. So that's super exciting too. And then there's all kinds of other things that are really exciting in our minerals industry. Let me just focus on two more. Rare earths and critical minerals are needed for things like permanent magnets and wind turbines and all kind of energy technologies. And there's two different companies, or probably more than two, looking at rare earths and critical minerals. So Wyoming has those minerals that we could produce and hopefully make new products here. Today, all those products are made in China. So we have a real opportunity to make them right here at home and support the pieces and parts that could be needed for our future energy sector. And then last thing I want to talk about is coal. I already talked about we use oil for all kinds of different things. For coal, we're focused on a couple different areas. One is carbon capture and storage. So like I said, we can use that carbon for enhanced oil recovery and boosting oil production. But where does that carbon come from? One place it could come from is to separate it from the other gases from coal-fired power plants or other industrial facilities. And so we have tons of work happening on this technology called carbon capture and storage. And it's really not just for coal, but that's where we're starting several coal-related projects in the state. And they're getting bigger to the point where we're demonstrating those in the field. So we have multi-million-dollar, tens of millions of dollar projects happening. And those are being led here at the University of Wyoming. And then the other area is coal to products. We call it carbon engineering. So here at the School of Energy Resources, we have a big program looking at what else we can do with coal. And so we have things like construction materials and bricks, soil amendments that help our soils be healthier and retain fertilizer and moisture, and then even making the extract that you use for coal to drive asphalt. So that is just, it's not even close to the full picture, but what I think everyone should know is that there's a ton of innovation happening in Wyoming, and it really touches every part of our energy sector. And there's going to be a lot of opportunity from now long into the future. So that was a lot, Laura, I know,
I
but
love
it's
it.
fun
I
to
have
like
three
cover it
questions
all.
for you that I want to. So I heard on Wyoming Public Radio that they are looking at the old power plant sites, the coal-fired power plant sites that might go end of life and they might be closing down because they already have the transmission infrastructure for the power. Is that correct?
Yes, for the new
Yeah.
nuclear
Mhm.
facilities, yes, they
Yeah.
are.
Okay.
Hmm.
Yeah,
Yep.
so that makes so much sense. So, some of these towns that were worried about drying up, like we've seen Hannah, Wyoming, for instance. It got
Mhm.
very small after the coal mine went under. And so they have actually a chance of potentially they could hopefully they had a power plant close by, but they have a chance of possibly because they already had the transmission infrastructure
Right.
of getting one of these one day.
I think that's like the really big advantage of these nuclear facilities and also carbon capture and storage. It's these really energy dense technologies, meaning that a lot of power is produced at like a power plant that isn't spread out over a lot of land. Is that I think when you think about rural America, one of the advantages of those kind of technologies is that keeps these energy communities whole. And so
Yeah.
it really is an investment. It's continuing those jobs. And it is not a direct transfer to work at a coal-fired power plant to a nuclear power plant, but a lot of the skill set is the same.
Interesting. Well, and I heard Wyoming Public Radio mention Gillette as a potential site too, which
Yeah,
I think is also great for that community.
yeah.
The second question I had to ask, I have to ask is about rare earth minerals. Now, do those make semiconductors or microchips or both?
Well, they make all kinds of things. They're in basically everything. So your little phone here has a bunch of them, and it's the rare earths are it is part of the periodic table, and they have certain properties. We're focused on them, some of that rare earths that make heavy magnets.
Mhm.
So yes, they're using chips. They're used in glass that doesn't have as much reflection, so non-reflective glasses. Like so many different parts of our lives use these materials and minerals. We're interested in them at the School of Energy Resources for two reasons. One is because of the economic benefit to Wyoming, the jobs and the revenue, but the other is because they're really important for the energy sector. So one thing they make is permanent magnets, like are used in wind turbines. So that's kind of how we got into it here, but
Interesting.
they're used in so many different areas of life.
So we won't necessarily have a microchip processing facility with a clean room in Wyoming anytime soon because we're really focusing on the magnets at this time.
Not necessarily we'll have all that, but I would say one of our goals here at the School of Energy Resources and across the university is to put in a lot of effort to make sure we're not just mining these minerals, that we actually do have separations facilities. So when you pull them out of the ground, you can separate them into their different components and remove them from everything else. And then what happens after that is you start to use them in products. We would love to get to the point where we are actually making some products. It might be magnets, it might be chips with a clean room, but it it remains to be seen. The first step
Yeah,
is
just to get them out of the
developing
ground. Yeah.
to get them out of the ground and also develop the technologies for our specific minerals. So, and there's a lot of work going on in that space. So Rare Element Resources is actually doing a demonstration separation facility in Upton, Wyoming. And then so they've already are done mostly constructing that demonstration. So it's super exciting. Earlier in the development phase as Wyoming Rare, it's a company, they're still understanding their resource, but they are going to do a pilot separation facility here in Laramie, Wyoming,
Oh,
with Western Research Institute. And that's just a pilot scale. It'll be a little smaller, but there really are some really exciting projects either underway or on the horizon.
that's cool. That's
Yeah.
really cool. And then the third question I had was, I got the pleasure of holding one of those coal bricks
Oh,
that they
good.
created, and they are really light. I was
Yeah.
so surprised. They're not as heavy as a regular brick. And I was just amazed at their RF factor, which is the energy rating. It was really high.
Yeah.
And what is the possibility of those going on the market? Are they trying
Yeah.
to get them there or and build a facility to produce them more quickly? And because when I got to hold one, they had been handmade. So
Oh, yeah.
what's the
Yeah.
progress on that?
This is the process of innovation. And so it's interesting. We're working on several different parts of the process right now. So that we're still finalizing the formulation. So we're really interested in these bricks being like viable across the country. Here in Wyoming, we have some pretty harsh conditions. And so what we found is a little bit of moisture got in and cracked them. So now we're reformulating them to make sure that there is no moisture getting in. But to your point, they have so many advantages. They're more insulative. They actually have lower emissions. Like clay bricks, people don't think of will have a little bit of emissions. I mean, it came out of the ground. So we don't have those. They're lighter, so they're cheaper to transport, but we still have to finalize the formulation. While we're doing that, we are also improving our process. So like as we are working on the formulation, we can make them by hand, but that's not going
Yeah,
to work
no.
in industrial scales.
Mhm.
So now we bought a machine compressor. So that's the other part as we improve and change our formulation is that our challenges with the bricks might not have actually been the formulation if you're patting them down by hand versus machine compression. So we're trying all these different things at once. And then you can't forget about the economics part. So that we're also making sure that our energy input and our raw materials input has to be cheaper than what's already on the market.
Yeah.
So these are all things that we're working on at the same time. I don't know when. Here's the hard thing about bricks.
Mhm.
Our first generation showed some need for improvement. So, but these are things that people are going to use on their house. So we have to get through a few winters before bricks that we feel good at before we will put these in stores.
Yeah, yeah.
So we have a couple more years, but part of it is just because we have to prove that they will live up to harsh conditions. And testing them right here in Wyoming means that they're going to stand up to some pretty harsh conditions before
Heavy
we put.
sun, heavy wind,
Yep,
heavy cold. Yeah.
yep, yep.
That's great. Well, I think it's exciting. I just seeing those, I thought, wow, they look good.
They do
And
look good.
and they're gonna look great on homes and buildings. And I just thought, well, that'll be neat. So let's move on to your vision of Wyoming's energy industry future. Um, what are let's talk about blockchain. Let's talk about digital futures. Tell me what your perspective is on that.
Yeah, I think that digitization and um, kind of like novel approaches to energy production really fit well with everything happening in Wyoming. So I think there's a couple different examples. As a rural state, one area of investigation that we might find interesting would be microreactors. So a microreactor is a really, really small nuclear reactor. It's not what I referenced earlier in Kemmer. That's a larger power plant scale. But for a microreactor in rural areas, it could have a lot of value. So just think about mining or oil and gas production in areas where there's no grid. Well, right now you don't get to, you can bring diesel generators, but otherwise you're not going to be able to operate. You have to have electricity. You have to run your pumps, to run everything. So an area of interest that for digitization might be microreactors, where the reactor is so small it can fit on the back of a semi. It is kind of plug and play where it pulls up to the site it needs to be used, and you use it, and then it's operated remotely. And then when it's done, when the fuel's done, it just is taken away. There's no operation on site. Um, so these are really, this is a whole new idea. It's more than a decade away, I would say, but Wyoming would be a great place to have that option. You know, one area, I'm on a advisory committee at Idaho National Lab, and one area that they're really keen on first deploying these would be when there's an extreme weather event, that you can get to a community and hook up and make a mini microgrid and turn the lights on way faster than you could, you know, get the power lines back up, especially a rural community. And so that's another application. And I could see that as something of interest to Wyoming in particular due to our rural nature. I think the other area that is really interesting, that I'll give you an example, you mentioned blockchain. So blockchain is, it's essentially a digital approach to tracking things. And so, for example, if you buy something at a grocery store and it turns out that thing has a problem, is like recalled, that's one of the ways they often find you. It's like they know who bought what because it's being tracked, and the name comes from, there's like this chain of codes, and it can't be altered once it's created. So it's very secure. And Wyoming is actually really ahead of the curve when it comes to blockchain. So our legislature has been really savvy. We have a center here at the University of Wyoming, and energy producers have long experience work with blockchain for a different reason. So, for example, flared gas. So sometimes when you produce oil, there's a bunch of natural gas that you don't have any way to get rid of. So it'll be flared, which just means burned. Well, now some companies that need energy that are mining crypto, which is a form of currency, cryptocurrency, they just plug into that heat and they use it to create their own electricity. And so I would say blockchain innovation and blockchain innovators have been in Wyoming for a long time, and that's kind of how it started. But now it's gone way beyond that. And so blockchain is, like I said, it's a great tracking tool. And so, for example, I already mentioned Wyoming has really low methane intensity natural gas. And we have low methane intensity, where we have low emissions when we mine our coal. Well, those are environmental attributes that some others outside the state or sometimes in the state will pay for. but they have to be guaranteed that they're buying a credit that is based on something tangible. And so that's something you can use blockchain to really track a methane molecule and say, okay, this is an environmental friendly piece of natural gas. And you use the blockchain technology to verify that. And then you can sell that emission credit and you can prove to the buyer where it was produced, how it was produced, what's being measured to prove that it actually has a low methane intensity. So this is just helping us create a really robust and rigorous process to sell our energy technologies that have some kind of environmental or other advantage. The other one would be rare earths. When there's a national security implication with rare earths or critical minerals, or uranium, that we produce here in Wyoming. Also, all of those, if you can prove that something was actually made here and it's in an end product, think about the U.S. Department of Defense. It's going to want to buy materials and rare earths from America, not from other countries. So blockchain would be a great opportunity to track that and prove it. So there's just kind of like limitless opportunities for that technology, and it should be applied to Wyoming's energy and mineral sector. And I'm just kind of scratching the surface with some examples.
So when you were talking about the microreactor showing up on a semi to a small, to a small community because of a weather event or a very rural site that needed power and, didn't want to run 18 generators, I was thinking about the Back to the Future DeLorean with the flux capacitor.
It might look like that someday. We'll see how cool they get.
Right?
Yeah.
So what you were talking about with using the flare gas, and if the student want to, they should go look up this article. There were two Texas kids, and I'm saying kids because they were under 21. They quit school because they got this great idea to build this hut next to these flare gas in Texas, and they were crypto mining using that energy,
Yep.
and they ended up becoming millionaires before they were 21. Now,
Wow.
that is because they were innovators. They were the first ones to do it. They had to convince the natural gas producers that, they weren't crazy or weird or anything like that. But, check out that article. It's a really good one. I know that the Center for Blockchain and Digital Innovation, the CBDI at the University of Wyoming, has a crypto mining class.
They do.
Yeah.
Yeah. And we actually were one of the first universities, I think, that actually had crypto mining units. And they're right here across the street, I believe, at the College of Engineering and Physical Sciences. So our students have access to all this.
It's pretty cool. Yeah. So
Yeah.
if you're interested in that, that's pretty awesome. And I love the fact that blockchain is being used to prove that it was made in the USA for additional government contracts. So thank you for sharing all that with us. That was pretty neat. Another question. What are some good resources for teachers to point students towards in learning about Wyoming's energy infrastructure?
That's a great question. So I would always welcome teachers. I would suggest, I think we're always trying to put out materials from the School of Energy Resources. We hold 2 or 3 conferences a year here in Laramie. We have rogue shows. You can follow us on social media. We have a new podcast. So for the energy side of all this, it's called Energy Frontier, the Wyoming Landscape. Because truly, when it comes to energy innovation, Wyoming is where it's at. When we started that, we were wondering if we would have enough material we were going to start it once a month. We've been doing once a week, and now our list of ideas is growing faster than our like we're putting them out. So there's a lot to learn. We also, you can go to our website at the School of Energy Resources that's focused on our academic program. So we have our undergraduate degree and several minors and certificates we offer through the School of Energy Resources, but then you can look through the Centers of Excellence web pages as well. So we're trying to always put out material, but we'd also welcome teachers to reach out to us because we would love to know what folks think would be most valuable, because we're always open to new ideas about how to get the word out about what's happening.
So you decided to go into the energy industry yourself.
Mhm.
Tell us a little about your career path in case some of the students in the audience are also interested in going into the industry.
So yeah, I have a funny story. So I was actually pre-med and I went to the University of Oklahoma and I took my first zoology class and realized that was not for me. I thought everything was gross and I have no business being in the medical field in any capacity. So I was left not knowing what to do. I love math, and so I went into chemical engineering because it's a really broad field. And so I instead of getting an undergrad job like at a coffee shop, I decided to do undergraduate research, which is something you can do here at the University of Wyoming too. So and I got paid, and I think I got paid more than I would have been. And it's a barista, although I actually did that as well for a while. That was fun too. And as I neared my senior year, my advisor um, convinced me to get a master's. He was like, "You've already been doing this for 2 years. It'll only take 1 year." And then 6 months into my master's, I didn't even get a master's because he was like, "You should just get a PhD." And so I spent 6 years in total getting this PhD. And at the end of my time, I kind of what I was researching was these turbulent flow fields that are used to like extrude plastics made from oil and make them into waterproof, like a waterproofing fabric. And at the end of my research, we kind of realized we were using supercomputers to study that, and because they were just becoming available, and had all these new resources to study things using computers. Well, it turns out that industry had already figured out the best approach to this, and that's what had been used since the 1960s. So after spending 6 years of my life to come to that conclusion, I decided I wanted to do something that was going to be impactful no matter what, and that would use my skill set. And so without any background in it really, or family history, I decided to go into energy, and I've never looked back. You can do anything in this field. Even if you don't know what you want to do, you will find your passion. I think just think about there's community outreach for projects, there's the technical side, there's economics, there's law and policy and regulatory work. You can go to a government agency or a state agency that does permitting. There's just like an infinite amount of opportunities. So I ended up focusing on carbon capture and storage, but even within that area, it's been really varied. So at first, the first 6 years of my career, I did research and I was very technical, and I led like a small research team focused on carbon capture technologies. But then as I started to move on in my career, I kind of became higher level in my thinking. And so I started working in my second job. I actually worked for an international company running an energy journal. Totally different, super unusual for an engineer to do something like that. But I liked writing too. And then I worked for a rural electric co-op in Colorado, kind of using research that had been done to help them with their facilities and strategies. And then I went to Peabody, which is Wyoming and the world's largest coal miner that isn't owned by a state. And I did government relations and communications and a little bit of technology work. And now I'm here at the university, and now I'm a pure administrator. But the point is, you never know where your career is going to take you. And like, I had a really unique kind of interest, but I think energy is a great field. Our undergraduate degrees at the School of Energy Resources, our undergrad degree is called Energy Resource Management and Development. And there's two concentrations: energy and environmental systems, and land management. And I think they're great because they're super broad. But anyway, I just think there's a lot of different ways you can go into energy. And I have never looked back, and I will spend the rest of my career working in this sector. It touches everything every day that we do, and nothing, you think about our lives, like nothing works without reliable and affordable energy. And there's a lot of cool things that are coming to fruition and under investigation. So you will never be bored in this field.
I love that. Thank you for sharing that path with you. And just looking around your office and mine, and I would encourage all the students to look around their classroom, or if they're at home, maybe a good video would be what's made with fossil fuels,
Oh
and
yeah.
figure out what you're standing in front of. and looking at what is made with fossil fuels and then trace it back to Wyoming. And maybe
Yeah,
it's even on the blockchain, so it'll be easier to trace. You never know. So
definitely.
that would be a great video to take. Thank you so much for coming today and to talking to us. I really appreciate it. And thanks for giving all these resources to the teachers.
Yeah. Thanks for having me, Laura.